Hello everyone. Hope you're all doing good. Recently, I was able to crack interview in Google, and the reason I applied, I'm not going to join, but still I wanted to understand the interview process. So, from an Azure data engineering perspective, the way I approached it, went, we had 7 technical rounds, which includes coding as well. So we have recorded each and every interview, and we will be creating a special playlist. So as a data engineer, Azure data engineer, how can you apply for Google? So Google never uses Azure, but still the way we have come up with the approach and the way you have applied, we will be showing step-by-step videos. So we'll be having 7 videos for 7 rounds, and this you can also keep as a track of how to crack a high paying job. So whether you're applying for a Google or a Microsoft or Amazon, the way you have to handle the interview, the way you need to fulfill the requirements as well as their expectations, this interviews will definitely be a turnaround for your preparations. So please go through all the videos step by step, and we will be publishing shortly one by one. Thank you.
Hi Satish, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So Satish, my name is Sandeep, and I'm going to be your interviewer for this round. So we're going to start this interview with a little bit of introduction about myself and yourself. I have been working in the data engineering field for the past 10 years, with the past 5 years at Google. So this is going to be the first round, and you will be having 7 rounds of the technical interview. And this round mainly focuses on your introduction and a little bit about your project. So I think we can start with your introduction.
Yeah, sure, Sandeep. Thank you so much, and I'm really glad to give interview for Google. And to talk about myself, I'm Satish. I do have around 6 years of experience working as data engineer. Initially, I started my career on SQL, and later, for the last 5 years, I've been working as a data engineer. I'm specialist at working with Azure as a cloud. So my primary skills will be like Python, PiSpark, and working with Azure services. And also, I have very good experience working with big data and data warehousing. So this is overall a high level about myself, and I'm currently working with Infosys, and the client which I'm working is Target, which is an insurance-based company, the current client.
Okay, sounds good. So you said that you're currently working for Infosys, right?
Yes, Infosys is my current company.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about your current project? Like, what do you do? What's your regular day-to-day work like? Give me a brief introduction about that as well, please.
Yeah, sure. So my current project, I'm working for Target, which is an insurance based. So what we do is, since we know that insurance is a Target is an insurance based company where we deal with multiple products, insurance products. Like we do have a insurance for the vehicles, and we do have the home insurance as well, and we do have the health insurance. So they deal with the different insurance products. So that what the problem that the current system is facing is we are getting the data from the different third party vendors in a different formats. So as a target team, we are unable to measure the performance of the company. So for that is where our data engineering team are helping in gathering the data. So coming about the business problem statement, creating a centralized data warehousing system was our objective. So we are getting the data in the form of a flat file, SQL files, as well as the Excel files and JSON files. So organizing them and creating the data pipeline was our need. And for this, we have used Azure and Azure services. And the reason to go with Azure was a quite in terms of pricing, Azure seems to be better, and that was the one reason. And we have used Azure Block Storage and Azure Data Lake Storage for storing the raw data, Azure Databricks and Azure Data Factory for the orchestration as well as the heavy lifting. And in Azure Databricks, we have focused morely on the PiSpark. That's one of my core strength, I would say. And finally, we're storing it into Azure SQL database, where that acts like a destination table. And from there onwards, a lot of downstreams pick out our data, and then we manage the pipeline. So this is a very high level understanding about project. And if you're interested, I can even walk you even deeper.
Okay. So I see that you have mentioned a couple of Microsoft Azure services that you are currently working with. Would you like to list them down one more time and give me a little bit brief about them?
Uh, yeah, sure. So when it comes to Azure services, if I'm not, I mean, I worked with almost 10 to 12 services. To rate myself, I would say block storage and data lake storage. I worked as a storage layer where I can rate 8 out of 10. And my main experience is on Databricks and Data Factory. Data Factory is like one ETL. We use it for most of the use cases. I would rate 8 out of 10. And Databricks, where we come up with a lot of transformations by using PiSpark, I can rate 7.5 out of 10. And apart from that, I work with Synopsys, and I work with Cosmos DB. I work with Azure Functions, and also I work with streaming analytics. These are all on top of the mind. I remember the services which I worked.
Okay, understood, Satish. So I would now like to take this to the technical discussion. Since you have already mentioned that you're good with SQL and PySpark, I would like to begin with SQL. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions on SQL to test your skills on that. Um, so how have you used SQL and how do you rate yourself in SQL?
SQL is one of my skill which I've used right from the beginning of my career. I would say for the last 6 years, I've been working with SQL. I would rate 8 out of 10. And the things which I've done in SQL is I have a good experience in creating the database objects, work with optimization of SQL codes, and I've used to pull the data from multiple databases. I work with Postgres, MySQL Server, Oracle PL SQL Server. All this I've been working, and majorly I've been working with the SQL coding. I would say trying to pull the data using joins, subqueries, window functions. All this I've been working, and that's my experience on SQL.
Okay. Did you also implement data cleansing in SQL?
Yes. I wouldn't say completely, but like few of the times where I have to do some missing value treatment, or like doing some of the additional transformations, we have used SQL because that's a straightforward thing to do. And if I'm not wrong, the exact function which I've used for data cleansing, where removing the missing values or replacing the missing values, I've used collapse function, which will just replace whatever you want to replace for the null values. And couple of window functions also I've used in data cleaning, where we try to give some additional columns and then we filter out. Yes, to answer your question, yes, we have done quite some data transformations in data cleaning as well.
Okay, understood. So, can you also tell me how can one optimize the SQL code?
Yes. Well, this is something which I've been doing for a couple of projects where the SQL code used to take more time. And the way I have implemented is like whenever we do have a SQL code, I'll first try to understand the explain plan. Explain plan will tell us like which part of the code it's taking time. And it's available in all of the editors where we can try to understand how much time it's taking. And the first thing is I'll try to refactor the code, replace wherever the full scan is happening, try to reduce a full scan, and wherever they have used subqueries, I'll try to use joins, because joins plays a major role when you're working with SQL. And rather than using main tables, I would prefer using common table expressions by using CTEs. This is one of the very much an optimized way to reduce your time taken, and using CTEs will reduce it, and we have tested it. And I should also tell you one instance where there was a project that I was working for banking before this target. I was working in a banking project where the code was taking around 45 minutes, but using my skills and my SQL features, I was able to reduce to 12 minutes. That's one of the achievement that I can proudly say that I worked with SQL optimization.
Okay, sounds good. So while you claim that you're pretty good at SQL, I'm gonna give you a couple of scenarios where you'll have to answer me on the SQL. So imagine if I had to calculate rolling sales like month on month, how would you achieve that in SQL?
Okay, you want to get the rolling month on month. Okay, is it fine if I can explain you orally?
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. So this is yes, it's easy to do it if you have a proper data. Assuming that I have a month data and the sales data, I can use window functions. Window functions like lead and lag are the two functions which I can remember on top of my mind. And for this case, since it's a month on month, I will be using lag function. So what exactly lag does is, let's say if you have a January, February, March, and you have sales, you will be having an additional column that is created as a lag, which gives you a one step down. And the sales will be like the sales and the previous sales, you can easily get it. And to talk about the exact code, I can use like select star sales, sum of sales over order by month, descending order, and order, and from the table. And on top of this query, I can calculate month on month. So month on month is easily calculated as current month minus previous month divided by previous month into 100 will give you the percentage. And this is easily possible by using window function.
Okay. Did you also manage databases in your experience?
Yes, for one project where I was pretty lucky to get into a from scratch project. So that is where I got a chance to create tables, objects, views, and I was able to also create some indexes. So that's something which I've done in my past, which I have a very good hands-on experience working with DDL, DML commands.
Okay. So you would say that you're pretty comfortable working with different databases.
Right.
Okay. And can you tell me how would you copy the data from one table to another table with only the structure?
One table to another table only with structure. Okay, so in that case, what I would write is create table as select star from the maybe source table, and this will give you with the data. If I don't want data, I can simply write a where condition where one equal to two. So in that case, what happens, since the condition fails, you should be able to get only the structure. This should work.
Okay. Um, all right. So can you also tell me what is the difference between the storage procedures and the functions?
Yes, so store procedures functions, all this comes under PL SQL, where you will be writing an anonymous block. So store procedure is usually preferred whenever you want to do some repetitive task. Let's say like if I want to talk about a scenario, every day I need to run a code which accepts a two parameters like a start date and end date. I need to generate a sales report. I can use store procedure. Source procedures, the goodness of store procedure is you can send the parameters or you can run it without parameters. That's a good point. And coming to functions, functions is usually preferred whenever you want to achieve some business logics, and if you want to have some mathematical functions or you can use some logical functions, you can always go with the functions. But to answer your question in terms of difference, store procedures for repetitive task, functions for any functionality, business logic functionality. Store procedures can work with or without the parameters, but in functions, parameters is necessary. In store procedures, you cannot call it in a select query as such. It has to be executed with the execute command, whereas functions can be executed with the select query. These are the three differences which I remember on top
O-
of my mind.
Okay, sounds good. Can you also tell me what do you understand by indexes?
Well, indexes is something which I can relate it to a book index. In fact, if you want to search some pages in a book, you will go and see the index, which will fasten your searching process. The exact same thing we can talk about a database index. So whenever you want to get the query in a shorter span, or if you want to get some results faster, we can use index. So index basically fastens the process of search query.
Okay, so do you think we can create index on each column?
Do you think we can create index on each column? Actually, I don't think we can do it because assume that we have 10 columns. So if I want to search any specific column, of course, I can create an index on top of it. But
Okay,
creating index on all 10 columns, definitely it's not a good idea. So indexes has to be created only on the columns which is used in the search queries. So no, this is something which we should not do it.
okay. So basically, you're saying that indexes cannot be created for specific columns.
I mean, you can create it, but not recommended, because 10 columns, 10 indexes, it's not a good idea to do it because it affects the performance.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So I'm gonna stop with SQL now. Let's move on to Spark and PySpark since you have mentioned that you have experience on Spark and PySpark as well. Can you tell me what is the difference between Hadoop and Spark?
Okay. The difference between Hadoop and Spark. Well, uh, we have a problem. The problem is big data. But if I want to talk about a solution, we do have two type of solutions. One is given by Hadoop, one is given by Spark. Now, if you talk about Hadoop, Hadoop is works on a parallel processing, and the main reason why we move to Spark because Hadoop has a problem with the streaming data. It can work only on the batch processing. So Hadoop is mainly used for batch processing. But in the recent times, we are all working with a real streaming data where the data has to be processed faster. And that is why Spark comes into picture. Now, Spark works on an on computational memory, which fasten the process, which will fasten the processing layer. So one main difference, I would say, Hadoop is a batch processing, whereas Spark is for streaming processing.
Okay. So can you also give me more information about how actually Spark works and how is it better than Hadoop?
Yes, definitely. So the first thing I would talk on Spark is Spark's works on memory, which makes a faster execution. That's what one main reason why it's better than Hadoop. Now coming to the architecture, we do have something called Spark driver, which is like the controller of the Spark application, and it will actually maintain the complete states of a Spark cluster. And the first thing what happens is at every the cluster has to be set up, and now your Spark driver connects with the cluster manager in order to understand the physical resources and like getting to know which resources are free where we can execute the job. And then we do have something called executors. Now these executors are the processes that performs the task assigned by the Spark driver. And we also have a cluster manager which is responsible for maintaining the clusters, which will be like running our Spark application. So this is a architecture of the Spark.
Okay. I have another question for you regarding Spark. Can you talk something about RDD?
uh,
Do you have any information about
yes.
RDD?
Right. So RDDs are like resilient distribution datasets, which acts like a temporary data frame. So usually what happens whenever you are executing any job on the executors, there will be a temporary dataset that will be created, which will store the internal results. And this RDDs basically are like immutable. That means you cannot change it. Once they have a data, it cannot be changed. So for the subsequent operations, what exactly happens is this RDD internal results will be reused for the upcoming transformations. So that's the main feature of RDD. And how RDDs are linked, which RDD has what type of results, that is maintained by something called DAG. So that's another feature in Spark which takes care of the like ordering and getting the flow diagrams that is managed by the DAG.
Okay. Can you also explain how would you optimize Spark jobs?
Yes. This is one like problem that we had in most of the projects, like optimization of Spark jobs. So I will like to talk about one instance that I'm currently working with the project target, where the Spark job was about taking around 25 minutes, which was quite big when you're working with the streaming data. So the way we have done is we have actually choose the right file format, whether you're working with Parquet file format, ORC file format, or the optimized ORC. This is something which we choose the file formats, and then choosing the right way of functions makes a lot of difference. Like we have a repartition or collage, or we have a reduce by key or a group by key. Choosing the right one gets you more faster. And we can also use broadcast variables and broadcast joins. That is one thing which I remember.
Okay.
and also using RDDs versus the data sets or data frames, that also plays a major role. So the way we do is like a trial and error, like try to figure out which gives a faster, depending on the data, depending on the volume of the data, we choose the right way. That's something which I do it for the projects in order to improve the Spark job.
Okay. Understood. So can you also tell me what is the difference between the group by key and the reduce by key?
Yeah, so this plays a major role in the optimization. Like both reduce by key and group by key results in the Y transformations, which means that they have a shuffle operation. So the difference I would say is reduce by key does a mapper side. And group by key does not do a mapper side combination. Usually the reduce by key is preferred one. At the end of the day, the number of data shuffling has to be reduced. The number of data shuffling is reduced, the performance will increase. So obviously among these two, reduce by key will actually have the less number of data shuffles, and that's why it is a preferred one when you're working with the optimization.
Okay. Do you have any information about broadcast joins in Spark?
Yeah, so usually whenever you're doing a joins, a lot of shuffles will happen. And since I was also talking about the optimization, right? Broadcast also plays a major role in one of the optimization technique, I would say. So let me tell you what happens in broadcast join. So usually whenever you're having a data and it is stored in a different worker nodes, right? So joining, what happens? Shuffling will happen. So we keep, it's like a tagline, I can say that more number of shuffles, bad the performance. So this broadcast join, what happens is, let's say we have two tables, one is a heavier table and one is a smaller table. This smaller table will be actually stored on the memory itself. Rather than storing on the worker node, it will be storing on the memory. So now what happens, whenever you want to do join, the data will be joined within the memory. So on computation memory is what is going to happen. So that is why your broadcast join gives you a greater performance when you're compared with the other joins.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you also tell me what exactly is data partitioning in Spark?
Data partitioning in Spark. Okay,
Yes.
so data partitioning, I would say it's basically a process of dividing data into smaller chunks. And usually, what happens? Spark performs parallel. I mean, Spark performs on this proper data partitions. Optimization can be improved because it achieves Spark to achieve your data locality, and it will also minimize your data movement and then reducing
Okay.
the overload. And of course, this also improves in the optimization of jobs.
Okay. I have one last question for you in Spark. Um, is it possible to deal with skewed data in Spark, and how does Spark deal with skewed data?
Okay, this is something which I haven't worked that much, but I have a fair idea. Of course, the data which we worked, we did not have any skew data, but on top of my mind, I remember that there are certain techniques that we can address this skewness. We do have something called Z ordering.
Okay.
And some custom partitions, or even we do have a built-in functions like repartition, bucket by, sort by. This can be definitely used to handle this skewed data.
All right. So Satish, we are about to get into the last part of our interview over here, which is going to be on Azure. And could you explain the process of designing an end-to-end data pipeline for Azure? Because that's what you have worked on mostly. And I would also like you to explain about data ingestion, processing, and serving the real-time data.
Sure, definitely. And yeah, so just coming to the pipelines that I've worked in Azure and in my complete experience is on Azure. So what exactly we do is we categorize them into different services like data storage, data injection, or data pipelines, or data transformations. The services which we use is a block storage and data lake storage, which is mainly preferred as ADLS, that is data lake storage, and that is what is preferred for the big data. Technologies where this acts like a storage. Then coming for the processing, the two services which I've used for processing is Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks. And Azure Data factory is for the orchestration where we do our data movements, and this is where like data injection comes into picture to answer your question. But the transformation part, I've used Databricks, and I've also handled NoSQL database, which we have used Cosmos, and some of the automations I've implemented by using Azure Functions. And I've also used Synopsys, where we have like we have it's basically called one-stop shop. And at the end, I would say that I've stored all the data into a SQL database, which acts like a target DB for us. From there onwards, we do have quite a data science team, business analyst team, who pick the data from there, and they take as the data for the processing. So that's what we have done as part of the data injecting as well as the data transformation.
Okay, understood. Can you also explain the differences between Azure Data Factory and the Azure Databricks?
Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks, both are used for the transformations. But if I focus on the Data Factory comes with the codeless transformations where you can achieve certain data movements, pipelines, data flows, Power Queries. We can have it. It's basically like writing some Excel formulas, right? We do have a Azure expressions, and basically it comes with the codeless transformations. But this is a very good service, but unfortunately, it lacks certain transformations. We cannot write a Python script, or we cannot write a PiSpark logic here, and that's one of the drawback. And that's why we are moving to Databricks. Now, Databricks is a community that it is generally provides a Spark cluster for us, and it's a overall it's a company itself, but we do have a link with this cloud services are linking with the Databricks, so that's why we call it as Azure Databricks. Now, by using Azure Databricks, we can do a lot of transformations. Since it provides a Spark environment, we can easily go and write PySpark. So that's one
Okay.
of the difference I would say. And more importantly, whatever the transformations which you are not capable of doing it in Azure Databricks, Azure Data Factory, now you can do it in Databricks with the help of PySpark code.
Okay. So what do you understand in Azure Databricks Delta Lake, and how does it enhance data reliability in the big data processing? Do you want me to repeat my
Um,
question?
yeah, can you repeat it?
So what exactly is Azure Databricks Delta Lake, and how does it enhance data reliability in big data processing?
Okay, so the first part of the question, I would say that data lake is like a storage layer that provides the asset transactions, basically like atomicity, consistency, all this transactions, which provides for the big data workload, which is basically on top of the data lake. Data lake acts like a storage, but on top of this data lake, you can provide this asset transaction that becomes a delta lake now. And to ensure your data consistency and reliability, we do have features like versioning, schema enforcement, and data type organizing. All these features will definitely help in ensuring the data consistency and also improve the reliability.
Okay. All right, Satish. Can you also tell me what do you understand by SCDs, and how do we implement them in Microsoft Azure?
Okay, did you mean slowly changing dimension?
Yes.
Yeah, so slowly changing dimension are the tables. It's a dimension tables which does not change frequently. If I'm talking about a table which has a very less number of inserts, but it can have updates, those type of things we can call it as a slowly changing dimension. And we do have three types: type 0, type 1, type 2. Type 0 basically just has an updates. Type 1 as a versioning record, like whether it's an active or inactive. Whereas type 2, we do have who has changed, when it was changed, those informations can be gathered. And since you have asked how to implement, I would focus on the type 2 because that's one thing which we usually follow in the projects. Type 0 and type 1 doesn't have that much of impact. So type 2, the way we handle is usually we have to do have two operations. One is an insert and one is an update. New records has to be inserted, old records has to be updated. The things which I do is basically I prefer Azure Data Factory for this. And the way I will handle is first I'll try to take the source, and then I'll try to insert it. Maybe I'll be using a primary key here just to identify which row has changed or which row has not changed. So I'll compare with the existing records. If the existing records, I'll compare with the new records. If it's Not matching, that means it's an insert operation. I'll go with an insert. And for this, I will be using something called lookup activity. And coming to if already it's existing, then I'll start comparing row by row, as well as a column by column, which has changed. And for that, I will go and perform update operation. So in Azure Data Factory itself, we have a special activity called alter rows. So in the alter rows, you can either go and add it. So whatever happens, any row that was changed, it will go and alter it. Now this becomes an update operation. So by using this,
Okay.
if I'm not wrong, I'll be using around 8 to 9 activities to achieve this.
All right. Can you also give me an example of a SCD that you might have used in your past projects?
In past project, I've used type 2, which just now I explained the flow, right? The complete 7 to 8 activities, the same thing which we've implemented. Usually type 0 and type 1 is avoided because it doesn't give that much of information.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna give you a scenario and I wanna see how would you approach that. So I need to process a copy of 100 files from source to the destination. How can I achieve this?
You want to process 100 files.
Yes. I
Uh,
want to
uh,
process copy 100 files from source to destination and how can I achieve this?
okay. So source and destination, can I assume any service?
Yes.
Okay, so
That's right.
assuming that the data is present in the block storage for maybe in a container, we do have 100 files and destination. Imagine that I have to move to a production database. See, writing 100 times is not a approach, but writing one time and reading multiple, running the multiple pipelines, that was a preferred one. So in Azure Data Factory, we do have a for each container, I mean for each loop. I can loop it. So what I'll write is I'll try to write a copy activity from source to destination. And for sending the file names, I can make use of parameter names. I mean, use of parameters will take the file name dynamically. And this I'll put it into a loop, that is a for loop. So one time you write it and you run it 100 times. So automatically 100 files can be moved from source to destination. This should be my approach.
Okay. All right. Have you also worked on Azure Synapse Analytics?
Not in the current project, not in the current company, but in the previous client when I was working for banking, the bank preferred to have one single service for all of the pipeline. So that is where I've used Synopsys. Synopsys basically it's like a one-time, one-stop shop, which includes data related services, transformation services, and we also have a BI tool that supports. So that is where I've used Synopsys.
Okay. I have a follow-up question on this. So what exactly is dedicated SQL pool and versus serverless SQL pool in Synapse? What do you understand by those?
Uh, okay. So in Synopsys, we do have both type of database. One is a dedicated SQL database and one is a serverless database. So whenever you have a dedicated server, you are actually managing the server. That means you are creating the database, you are creating the configurations, you are deciding what type of configuration the database should have, like a processing layer, what is the size, everything you decide. That's a dedicated server. And usually it is preferred whenever you are managing the complete system. Whereas if you just want to write a SQL code for the analysis where you don't want the complete database, only for doing some analysis, you require some server you need. So that is where we do
Okay.
have serverless pool. So here what happens, the Synopsys manages a database for you. You need not go and create the database and all. There will be a space, there will be a server that will be given where you can just go and run the code. If I want to relate it to a layman term, I can call it like a sandbox.
Okay. Understood, Satish. So I have another question for you. How would you secure sensitive data? Imagine if a company has very much sensitive information in the data, how would you secure that?
Okay. Securing data. So whenever we are working with maybe the customer information, like personal information, definitely this can be used by role-based access control, which we call it as RBAC. And we can implement this by using Azure Active Directory authentication. And we can also have a enabled encryption, which we can use it. And for storing some of the information, I can prefer Azure Key Vault for managing the keys. And also the best practice I would prefer is we can use customer managed keys. which we can implement by using network security and by also regularly updating your encryption keys. Like we can have a rotation basis, like this encryption keys keeps on regenerating, which will keep your secure data.
Okay. So have you dealt with any kind of secure data in your past projects or your current project?
Yes, I was part of the. I mean, I was part of it. I have worked on under the customer information. Like I was responsible for creating the services, and I was managing the secure data by encrypting keys. Like I was the person who was generating the keys. So I do have experience on this.
Okay. I would also like to understand what are the challenges that you have had in your previous projects?
Uh, yeah, I had a quite number of challenges in all the projects. If I want to talk about the latest one in the current project, I would say that the business knowledge was one thing, like we lacked it because the client just gives a requirement and asks us to build a pipeline, but we were not knowing like which team is sending what data, what is the volume of the data that we are getting. That is one thing which we lacked. And we also were getting the data from 6 to 7 data sources, but unfortunately we did not have a common column. Again, we have to go back to the source team, discuss on the architectures, come up with a one common column, those things, like we handled it. And the one of the major problem I would say is the data quality. Just 60 to 70% of the data were workable data. I have to put a lot of efforts in organizing it, which was a problem. And then finally, data quality and transformations is what one of the biggest problem I would say, because we have to understand the problem statement, come up with the logics, and we always keep poked from the data engineers and data analysts like to add additional columns. So that was a bit challenging, I would say.
Okay. So I have another question for you. So as a data engineer, we have a lot of responsibilities, but I would also like to understand what were your roles and responsibilities like in your previous roles? Like every single day from the start of your day till the end, I would like to understand all the operations that you have managed and dealt with.
Okay, in my 6 years of experience, the roles and responsibilities I basically have is I try to work closely with the clients, because
Okay.
I was the senior most data engineer, like who takes more responsibility. Work with a team in generating the BRD and FRD. To talk about this, it's a business requirement document and functional requirement document. I create this document based on the discussions we make or the calls. I closely work with the business analyst to understand the requirement, and I also guide the team in managing the pipelines. I delegate the work to the juniors, but majorly I work with clients. I take the ownership of delivering the products, delivering the pipelines, and I work with overlap time with the clients. We do have an alternative day calls. We do have agile methodology, so that's one thing which we process, the process we follow. And overall, I would say 80% of the development pipeline work, 20% of managing calls, team, scrum meetings, all this.
Okay. So basically, not only were you a data engineer, you were also leading a team of the data engineers.
Yes, we can say that, but I'm not a leader on paper. Like I've been not
Okay.
given and assigned as a team leader or a project manager yet. But the way I work is like I'm a senior developer who takes responsibility. Since the juniors comes in the team, I groom and I do it on my interest and my I would say to have a developed career. I do it, but
Okay.
yeah, you can say that 80% of development work, 20% of managing the team.
All right, Satish. So I would like to bring this interview at the end today, and I'm done with the initial round discussion. And this will be followed up by deep technical questions with coding and everything in SQL, PiSpark, and everything, if you are selected. And one last question I have for you is, do you have any questions for me?
Oh, well, yeah, thank you so much. Actually, it was a very good discussion with you. I think all of your questions were very much interesting, which tested my skills. Thank you so much for that. One question which I do have is I'm a person who always looks for learnings in career. So, what type of learnings I can get here?
Okay. So let me tell this to you, at Google, you're going to meet a lot of dynamic people who are very much talented. So like you said, that you were the most senior person in your previous projects. You're going to meet a lot of senior people who have already been working on data engineering projects for more than 2 decades. So it's going to be a good opportunity for you. We also have a lot of, events where all the data engineers meet and share information about the new tech changes that are happening. So it's going to be a great opportunity for you. So don't worry about that. If you're selected, it's going to be a very good career opportunity for you, Satish.
Yeah, that's good to know. But just I was just thinking that if I'm not wrong, in Google, you use GCP, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yes. So I was about to mention this to you at the very end. So the reason I had interviewed you and asked you most of the questions on Azure is because you had most of your experience on that. But moving forward, as we are about to get into Google, the cloud platform that we use over here is our very own Google Cloud platform. So moving forward in the panel discussions, and the interviewers are going to ask you questions on that. So you shouldn't be having too much problem on that, but I would suggest that you spend more time learning more about GCP, as we are going to be working 100% on that.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, it's SQL doesn't change, your PiSpark doesn't change. What really changes is your cloud. So definitely, I'm
Absolutely.
really excited to go. Have the next few rounds, and I'm also interested to spend the next few years on GCP, which is what I'm looking for. So thank you so much for giving me that heads up. I'll try to have a good brush up on the GCP technologies. So that's something
Sure.
which I'll do it for the upcoming rounds if the thing goes good. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely, Satish. I will let you know via email. Thank you very much for your time. You have a great day.
Yeah, thanks for your time. It was a very good discussion, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.